In our Anova project, there's a couple extra credit opportunities using Excel, so I want to go over how to use Excel to get those extra credit points. So first thing we need to do with this project is choose one categorical variable and one quantitative variable. Make sure you get those approved by me. So let's go over to our data set and choose that now. So let's do natural hair color. So choosing first categorical data, I want that in the first column. So things that with words, or there's also the birth months, which are categorical. So I'm going to choose hair color for my categorical data and say, so I clicked on the H to highlight the whole thing and say Control C. And then I'll go over to a new sheet and put that in column A. So I'll just click there on the top of column A and say Control V, or I can right click and paste. Now I need some numbers. I need the quantitative data. So I'm going to go back to the raw data and let's choose some numbers. So let's do how many hours you work in a week. So let's compare, see if there's a relationship between hair color and how many hours our students work in a typical week. So I'll click on the J to highlight the whole column. Control C to copy it. Now it's on my clipboard. Go over to sheet 2 and click in the top of B and say Control V to paste it in. I'm going to change my sheet name so I keep track of what I'm doing here. I'm going to call this hair color versus work hours. Okay. I'm not loving the way it looks because I like them to be a little more narrow, so I have some space for my tables over here. So I'm just going to click these and say home wrap text. That way I can actually make these a little smaller. These columns I'll make a little smaller. I'm going to highlight them both so I make them both the same size. And wrap text. Oops. There we go. All right. Yeah, I like that better. So now I got my 2 columns of data. Now you see these holes. This is where somebody entered their hair color, but not the number of hours they work each week. Maybe they work 0. Maybe they didn't want to answer. I don't know. So since I don't know, I can't really use that. And this person put in the number of hours they worked their week, but they left the hair color blank. So this is going to be some non-response that I'm going to have to get rid of from my data. So I could go like one by one and find those little blanks and highlight the whole row and delete it. I want to delete the whole row, not just the empty cell. But I can't use that hair color if I don't have the hours worked as well. So if I'm missing one variable, I need to delete them both. So I can delete it by clicking on the number for the row and say right click, delete. But that'd be kind of exhausting to go through this whole thing and look through all those gaps. So another way to do that quicker is to go to the top of the column, highlight the whole thing, say sort. And it doesn't matter if you do smallest or largest, but just sort it. Expand the selection so it keeps the ordered pairs together. And then it will bring all those empty cells to the bottom. So I can scroll to the bottom now and just say, okay, let's get rid of all of these. So see all these empty cells. Let's get rid of all those rows. All right, so I can highlight all of them by clicking on the row number and then click and drag. And that gives me all of them. And now I can right click, delete. Now they're gone. I did that to get all the blanks from the hours worked, but let's also do that for hair color because maybe they put the hours worked, but not the hair color. So I'll do sort again, this time A through Z, expand the selection so I keep my ordered pairs together and go back to the bottom again and notice there's 2 people who put in the hours worked, but not their hair color. So I'm going to delete both of those rows. So I'll click, drag, right click, and delete. All right, so now my data doesn't have any gaps in it. So that data has been cleaned now. So let's go back to my Word document here. So I chose my data and I did natural hair color as my categorical. And I did hours worked for the quantitative. So hours work per week. All right, second step, copy the 2 columns and for the variables in the new Excel sheet. We did that. And then we just cleaned our data by deleting all those rows that have a missing variable. All right, so now to my extra credit. First thing I'm going to do is make a pivot table of means. So I want my means, or the averages, the average of hours of they work per week. So go back to Excel, and if I want to select this whole table, I can click anywhere in the table and click Control A. And then I'll go to Insert Pivot Table. From Table Range. And if I highlighted it, it should show up right here. But if for some reason it doesn't show up right there, like that is the definition of that's like the Excel code to say cell A1 through B812 of this worksheet. But for some reason it doesn't show up there, you can delete whatever is there, and you can just click in that field and highlight the columns headers to show, get everything that's in column A and B. And then we can decide if we want to put in a new worksheet. It'll make a new sheet right here with the pivot table, or if I want to put it right next to my data. And I kind of like putting it on the same sheet. So I'm going to say put it in the existing worksheet, and then I'll click in that field that says location and click in the sheet where I want the pivot table to land. So there, I want it to land right there. So I told it where to get the data, that's the table range, and then where to put it. And then I'll say, okay. So it's going to put a pivot table here, but then I say, well, what does it want? What do you want in the pivot table? Well, I want my columns to be the possible hair colors. So I'll choose natural hair color here and drag that over to my rows. I want my rows to be the hair color options. And then here I want to put what is the average number of hours that each of those hair colors worked. So I'm going to grab the number of hours that they work, put that in values, and notice the default is actually sum. So I can find out that all the people with black hair worked a total of 4,458 hours. All people with brown hair worked 8,000 some hours. Red people only worked 260, but each group has a different number of people. So that's kind of not very helpful. So sum is not a great statistic here. I'm actually wanting mean, or the average. So I can double click this to change that. I'm going to change it to average. I know that Excel will default to the mean averaged when I say average, so I'll do that. And I'm also going to rename this because I like my column to be a little bit shorter, so there's not so much white space there. So I'm going to call that mean of hours worked. I'm just kind of shorten it up a little bit, or work per week. Okay. All right. That looks better. I still don't love this many decimals. It's a lot of decimals. It's a lot more decimals than I need. I mean, I can just round that up to 20 hours per week, right? So I'm going to just kind of use this button under number to decrease the number of decimals. I think 1 decimal place is nice for hours. So I think I'll leave that. A little bit of personal choice there, but I think that looks nice with 3 significant digits. I also want to get rid of the word blank. Again, that's personal choice. I just think it would look nice if I got rid of that. So there's a little drop-down box here, and I can just uncheck blank so that doesn't show up in my table. And there's my pivot table. So I want to get some extra credit for that pivot table, so I'll grab my snipping tool, say new, and take a picture of it and put it into my Word document. So here we go. So notice we found the means, not the sums. The sums was the default, but we changed it to have the mean of hours worked per week. So, or hours of whatever our variable is here. So there's my pivot table, 2 extra credit points, done. All right, the next thing I want to do is make an Anova table. That one's a little bit more complicated because I have to reorganize the data a little bit. So for my pivot table, it gives it to me just straight from here. For my Anova table, I actually need to make columns for each of the categories So the categories were, I can see them all right here: black, blonde, brown, other, and red. So I'll make a column for each of those. So black, blonde, brown, other, and red. And I already sorted this column A when I went to go delete them. So I have them sorted as black first, and then brown, and then reds. So what I want to do is grab all the numbers that go along with someone with black hair, click and drag to get all those numbers. And I'm going to put that in, and I'll say Control C to put those numbers in their own column. Control V. Do the same thing with blonde, brown, other, and red. So go down to blonde, do it for the blondes, and so on. Okay, so I skipped ahead in time a bit, so you don't have to watch me sort. But I grabbed all the brown hairs and put those in, and I did that for blonde. And now I'll do that for other and red. So I'm going to scroll towards the bottom where others and reds are. Other is right here, so I'll highlight those. Control C, put those in their column, and finally the reds. Okay. So once I have everybody sorted into their own column, each of the categories in their own column, doesn't matter if they're different sizes or not, I can still make an Anova table. So to make an Anova table, you have to have this data button and a data analysis button. If you're on the school computer in our classroom, you have that already installed. If not, then I will show you a second video where I'll show you how to get that button installed. So don't know how to do it on Apple, but if you're on a PC, I can show you how to install it. If you're in the classroom computer, it should already be there. All right, so in the classroom computer, or if you already have it installed, click Data, and then Data Analysis. And here we can see all these tests that you're familiar with: F-test, histogram, a bunch of T-test, Z-test, things that we know a little bit about. This one is going to be the Anova single factor. So that's our one variable Anova test. So I'll click OK. And it wants some information from me. It's like, well, where is that table? It actually took a guess. Look at that input range. It said, is this the stuff that you want? And yeah, it is. But say it wasn't there. Say I didn't know that. You can just click in that input range and then highlight the columns you want. And then it'll put it there. Say it's in columns. Label in first row. Yeah, there's labels in that first row, so I want to keep that checked. My alpha is 5%, so keep that. And then decide where you want to put it. Let's see, so I could put it on a new worksheet. It will land right here. Or I like to put it right next to it, so I'm going to put it, let's put it in M2. In fact, you know what I think I'm going to do? Cancel. I think I'm going to just move my table over a bit so I can put it next to under my pivot table here. Okay, so let's do that again. Data analysis. Anova single factor. If you don't see it, scroll up. It's the very first thing. I'll click OK. It wants GK, but now I moved it over, so now I got to tell it, nope, my input range is not that anymore. My input range is over here now, L through P. It's in columns. I have a label in the first row. My alpha is 0.05, and I want you to put the table, let's see, not in M2, but I think I want you to put it over here in D10. So I'll click on D10 and click OK. And there's my Anova table. So I will grab that for the rest of my extra credit. Notice my F value, my critical value, my P value, my sum of squares, degrees of freedom, variances, averages. Notice that these averages probably match these because Excel calls an average a mean and average. So there's black hair had an average of 20, so that matches up. So notice that these actually match up. So the pivot table, this information is actually right here. I did want to just practice getting pivot tables, but the Anova table gives us even more. So I want to get a picture of this and put that into my Word document. and get